So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 6, Text 10. Om Ajnanatirmirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmlitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamshta Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namo Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from Canto 3, Chapter 6, Text 10. If you have it on your phones, you can repeat after me. If you don't have it on your phones, wing it. Make it happen. All right. Smaran Vishwasrajam Isho Vigyapitam Madhokshajaha Virajam Atapatsvena Tejasaisham Vivrittaye Smaran Vishwasrajam Isho Vigyapitam Madhokshajaha Virajam Atapatsvena Tejasaisham Vivrittaye. Smaran Vishwasrajam Isho Vigyapitam Madhokshajaha Virajam Atapatsvena Tejasaisham Vivrittaye. Smaran Vishwasrajam Isho Vigyapitam Adhokshaja Virajam Atapatsvena Tejasaisham Vivrittaye. You can't try. Okay, there you go. Smaran Vishwasrajam Isho Vigyapitam adhokshaja Virajam atapatsvena Tejasaisham vivrittaye. Smaran, remembering Vishwasrajam, of the demigods entrusted with the task of cosmic construction. Ishaha, the Supreme Lord. Vigyapitam, as he was prayed for. Adhokshaja, the transcendence. Virajam, the gigantic universal form. Atapat, considered thus. Svena, by his own. Tejasa, energy. Esham, for them. Vivrittaye, for understanding. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. He probably gave it to us in the middle of the night when most people were sleeping. Translation: the Supreme Lord is the super soul of all the demigods, entrusted with the task of constructing the cosmic manifestation. Being thus prayed to by the demigods. The word in the Sanskrit is Vigyapitam, being prayed to, or he was prayed for. He thought to himself and thus manifested the gigantic form for their understanding. I'll read it again. The Supreme Lord is a super soul of all the demigods, entrusted with the task of constructing the cosmic manifestation. Being thus prayed to by the demigods, he thought to himself and thus manifested the gigantic form for their understanding. Purport: the impersonalists are captivated by the gigantic universal form of the Supreme. They think that the control behind this gigantic manifestation is imagination. Intelligent persons, however, can estimate the value of the cause by observing the wonders of the effects. That's an important principle. I'll repeat again. Intelligent persons, however, can estimate the value of the cause by observing the wonders of the effects. For example, in the individual human body does not develop from the womb of the mother independently, but because the living entity, the soul, is within the body. Without the living entity, a material body cannot automatically take shape or develop. When any material object displays development, it must be understood that there is a spiritual soul within the manifestation. The gigantic universe has developed gradually, just as the body of a child develops gradually. The conception that the transcendence enters within the universe is therefore logical. As the materialist cannot find the soul and the supersoul within the heart, similarly, for want of sufficient knowledge, they cannot see that the Supreme Soul is the cause of the universe. The Lord is therefore described in the Vedic language as Avan Manasa Gocharaha, beyond the conception of words and minds. Due to a poor fund of knowledge, the mental speculators try to bring the Supreme within the purview of words and minds. But the Lord refuses to be so intelligible. The speculator has no adequate words or mind to gauge the infinity of the Lord. Beautifully written. The Lord is called Adokshaja, or the person who's beyond perception by the blunt, limited potency of our senses. One cannot perceive the transcendental name or form of the Lord by mental speculation. The mundane PhDs are completely unable to speculate on the Supreme with their limited senses. Such attempts by the puffed-up PhDs are compared to the philosophy of the frog in the well. This is Prabhupada's favorite analogy for people who try to be intelligent or pretend to be more intelligent than they may probably are. A frog in a well was informed of the gigantic Pacific Ocean, and he began to puff himself up in order to understand or measure the length and breadth of the Pacific Ocean. Ultimately, the frog burst and died. Uh-oh. The title PhD can also be interpreted as plow department, a title meant for the tillers in the paddy field. The attempt of the tillers in the paddy field to understand the cosmic manifestation and the cause behind such wonderful work can be compared to the endeavor of the frog in the well to calculate the measurement of the Pacific Ocean. Last paragraph. The Lord can reveal himself only to a person who is submissive and who engages in his transcendental loving service. The demigods controlling the elements and ingredients of universal affairs prayed to the Lord for guidance, and thus he manifested his gigantic form as he did at the request of Arjuna. Srimad Bhagavatam is so enlivening. Even though this section may seem to be very like chewing sawdust, my spiritual master would say. It's tough to go through the sections of the Bhagavatam that speak about creation to such detail. In one sense, it's very wonderful that we have intricate details about how creation takes place. At the same time, which in other traditions you don't necessarily have, it's all like, yeah, God just made everything happen. But how? The Bhagavatam gives us such intricate details. But at the same time, the details might be mind-boggling, beyond our conception. We go, what? I mean, just reading the translation, the Supreme Lord is the super soul of all the demigods entrusted with the task of constructing the cosmic manifestation. Thus prayed to, he thought to himself, and thus manifested a gigantic form for the understanding. What? And then this is one of the easier translations when you read the previous verses or the next verses of how each demigod manifests as a particular sense of our bodies. You know, you do one of these things where your eyes twist to the middle. But it's still very wonderful. As we see in the purport, Prabhupada makes it very applicable to us. He gave us 3 long paragraphs to explain this subject matter. And I was appreciating because the acharyas also have commented on this verse, but they've given like 2 lines. But Prabhupada has given us so much more in his, as he would say, he has given his ecstasies in the purport. When I studied this section, I underlined some areas. So this is many, many years ago, but I don't remember this PhD being plowed department. I underlined that, but I never remembered it. And now it's interesting because I've heard 2 other acronyms for PhD. Of course, philosophy of doctoral philosophy is one. It's what it's meant to be. But PhD is also what I've heard is permanent head damage. Another one I've heard is pretty huge dummy. Of course, I don't have a PhD, so I have no right to say anything about it. It takes a lot of work and effort to become a PhD. And it certainly teaches you how to research. As you go through a PhD degree, it gives you certain skills to research. But you see, the dinging that Prabhupada gives in the purport of a PhD is that you can't approach spiritual subject matters with the prowess of material intelligence. So he's not dinging the fact that one is maybe taking up a PhD, but what he's dinging or attacking is the pride with which persons approach trying to grasp knowledge. And especially when it comes to spiritual knowledge. In the Uddhava Gita, Krishna explains to Uddhava that Vedic sound and Vedic knowledge is right there, but it's very deep, very unfathomable. One cannot really understand it. That's why in Bhagavad Gita, the phrase is used, Guhyatamam, the most confidential. Why is it confidential? Bhagavad Gita is right there, anyone can read it, but it's confidential because it's not easy to grasp. It's so subtle. Who we are is so subtle, the spiritual soul. And who is God? The source of the spiritual soul. Even more subtle. Sukshma is the Sanskrit phrase that speaks about Krishna being the most subtle. So to be able to access that which is most subtle is not an easy task at all. In the end of this purport, Prabhupada says, the only way you can access that which is subtle is when the Lord reveals himself. For one who is submissive, but not only submissive, but actually engages in his transcendental service. So this topic can be very mind-boggling. Sometimes as devotees are going through this section, I know for my wife especially, she has so many times when our spiritual master gave commentaries on the section, chapter 2, chapter 3, canto 2, canto 3, she would often ask Maharaj, this is so confusing, I don't get it. How do I deal with these sections of the Bhagavatam? So one is to just simply appreciate how great Krishna is. And the technology is more complicated than what we might be exposed to. And so it's complicated. And so that's one piece, is to appreciate the complicated nature of Krishna's technology. The second is that just by continuously hearing, it purifies the heart. Even though we don't understand it, we're at least left with some awe-inspiring feeling, oh my goodness, this stuff is up there. So, repetition, continuous hearing. I know when I first read this section, it was a little challenging. But now as I'm, several years later, going back and studying this section, it's, I have a better sense. So in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada makes a statement in the purport of one of the verses that, Krishna repeats about the soul being different from the body, and he repeats that message over and over again. Prabhupada said, repetition is important for understanding. So if we don't understand, Prabhupada would be asked what to do if you don't understand. Study it again, read it again, read it again. Now it's not just that we read it again the same day and continuously, but rather what happens as we go through life, through submission, through engagement in devotional service, chanting the holy name, by Krishna's grace, subtle subject matters become more within our grasp. We become more attuned to subtle subject matters. And that's a power. That's a power that the devotees are given. And our ability then to navigate the world as we engage with people of the world, say workplace, school, whoever we're, friends in the community, we have ability to understand subject matters, subtle subject matters, and we quickly go to subtle subject matters, and they cannot. I don't know how many times I've been told, you're really weird, or something, because, the ability to do that is stronger. So repetition means we go back to hearing after some time of purification, go back and hear, and now all of a sudden we get some more insight. So repetition is necessary. There's a story of a lady who had a basket. Okay, and what's the story exactly? She was told by a sage. Oh, she was told. She said, "I don't understand these subjects that you're talking about." Okay, so the lady, the sage told the lady, "Take your basket, go to the river, fill it with water, and bring it back home every day. Do this every day." So the lady went to fill water, comes back. By the time she gets home, all the water is gone because the basket has holes. She goes back, gets water the next day, brings it back. She did it for some amount of time, let's say a month. Goes back to the sage. "I've been doing this every day. There's been no benefit. I don't bring any water back home." And the sage says, "But at least the basket became clean." You see? So even though we may not totally understand and grasp all of these technical, complicated subject matters, the purity that results of repeatedly studying this section becomes awakened. Now, this text 10, in the beginning of this chapter 6, well, let me just go back. The end of chapter 5, the demigods have prayed to the Supreme Lord. They were really struggling to make things work, right? The demigods are also called the prototype demigods. In a translation of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on this verse, the demigods are discussed, are translated. It's translated as personified elements. So we have many elements. In the beginning of this chapter, it's talked about 23 elements. I'm actually studying a section in the Uddhava Gita where Uddhava asks Krishna, there's sages say there's 3 elements, 6 elements, 9 elements, 13 elements, 16 elements, 17 elements, 23 element, 24 element, 25 element, 26 element, 20. How many elements are there really? I mean, like, everybody has a different model. And then Krishna makes the comment that, well, Uddhava, they're all right. They're all using very good reason to give their logical understanding of how many elements there are, and I accept all of them. As per me, the way I explain it, 28 elements. We've heard the 24 in other places, but Krishna also explains in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, he gives 8 elements. 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, he gives 24 elements. In Uddhava Gita, he says, I say the 28 elements, but it's all right. Just different perspectives. So these elements are personified demigods. In the previous chapter, praying to the Lord, we can't keep going. We can't bring about creation. We're struggling. We can't unite. We're not doing this right. What do they do when they can't? When they're struggling to have alignment and cooperation and collaboration? They pray to Krishna. And Krishna personally, it says in the beginning of this chapter, personally with the aid of Kali, his Shakti, enters into these elements to help them go the next stage in the process of creation. And that's where this universal form becomes manifest. So up till now, text 1 to text 9, the description of the unfolding of the universal form is being discussed. Now in text 10, it's sort of like a mini conclusion to the section where he gives the reason, the purpose behind the manifestation of the universal form. So the why is given here. It's no longer necessarily the how or the technical aspect. In this verse, in text 10, it's talking about the why, which is really important. The why in Sanskrit is Vigyapitam. Vishwasrajam means those who are responsible for the creation, the demigods, the prototype demigods or the personified elements. Vigyapitam have prayed to the Lord, so the Lord deeply considered within himself and is gradually responding to those prayers. Because in the purport we read the gigantic universe has developed gradually. So the response to the prayers of the demigods is happening. Number one, it's actually happening, that Krishna is responding to prayers for bringing some collaboration and unification, but he's also doing so gradually. Bring it down to our level. We might run into situations where things are just not working out, like the demigods. Collaboration, unification, cooperation, alignment is not happening. What to do? In the 8th canto of the Bhagavatam, we see this again with the demons and demigods. Repeatedly, they're having collaboration issues when trying to churn the milk ocean. And repeatedly, the Supreme Lord is invoked to please help. Often he doesn't do so by his own volition. He waits to see, do we want his help? And so the demigods have prayed, please help us. And the Lord here is manifesting his universal form as a gesture of affection or reciprocation for those prayers. So what to do? We pray. And to pray sincerely. Now, these demigods are praying, they're praying what seems to be for something material. Is it okay to pray for something material? In the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada explains, even if someone is approaching the Lord for some material motivation, it's okay. Because the way Krishna reciprocates with that is that he will fulfill, in some cases, he will fulfill the material desire such that the devotee becomes attached to him. You see? Like a parent may fulfill the desire of a child that may be, hey, my son sent me a text message this morning as he was driving to his swim competition early in the morning. He said, Papa, please make for me pizza with cheese and olives. Right? For me, the response is, I'll do that. And it's a reciprocation. Sure, he'll enjoy the cheese and olives pizza, but deeper or higher than that is the fact that there's a relationship being built. So Krishna reciprocates with the living entity, even if they're praying for some material desire, sometimes with the intention that this relationship becomes stronger, and the devotee goes, oh, Krishna is so kind, something material. But that's fine. Ideally, a pure devotee doesn't pray for anything material. But if there's something material desire in the heart, one can pray for it. Or one can simply say, Anyabhilashita shunyam, say no to it. I don't want to act on it. But if it's very strong, then one may pray to Krishna. It's like that. So another point in the purport, Prabhupada says that intelligent persons can estimate the value of the cause by observing the wonders of the effect. And then goes on to discuss about the soul. So you see how a body, which is really wonderful, how a living being comes to be formed within the womb of a mother is absolutely astounding work of miracle of God. I mean, we've gone through having 2 children, and I have just marveled, enjoyed observing how this growth happens. And I continue to observe my children, the children. They might for some amount of time. I'm observing the children as how are they growing, and it's just fascinating. At one point in time, this 150-pound person used to be, how? It's a miracle. And I look at myself. I used to be like that too. I used to be like really tiny, like literally really tiny in this body. And now the body is like this. The body is getting old and it's going to die. So this process of the material body going through birth, growth, maintenance, producing byproducts, dwindling and finally dying, these 6 stages, is fascinating. But to know that behind it is a spiritual force, is a living entity, is a soul. Intelligent persons, Prabhupada says, can see the soul driving the whole thing. Right outside my house, I have this crab apple tree. It's apple tree. So when we first moved in 6 months ago, it was a bare-looking tree. It had nothing on it, and I didn't know what it was. But then springtime comes around, and it's beautiful colors came out of it first. It's like, wow, really pink, flowers. I remember sharing with my mom, look at this, so beautiful pink flowers at the beginning part of spring. In the next phase is suddenly you have these huge, many apples on this tree, crab apples. And many have fallen to the ground. And then very soon, it's all going to go after the fall season comes. And I was appreciating, where did this crab apple come from? And last week I went for another swim competition for my kid, and I was taking a walk and I saw a blueberry tree. Blueberries are just like so fascinating. If you see the intricacy of a blueberry, beautiful. How did Krishna facilitate the creation of a blueberry or even a crab apple? These trees, powered by the soul within them, are taking elements from the earth and somehow, with some process, some magic technology, are producing an apple and producing a blueberry. Wonderful. So the soul and the super soul is driving all of that. I was last night I was reading an article about they found the James Webb telescope has found maybe some idea of dark stars. Scientists are completely bewildered about how our universe is kept together. They have no idea. So they give it a label. The label is dark matter. Now, what is dark matter? And that article said yesterday, we don't know what dark matter is. But dark matter is supposed to be 96% of the universe. What? They've only accounted for 4% of the universe. 96% is supposed to be dark matter? Yes, that dark matter keeps everything together because we see these gravitational forces. We don't understand it. We don't know where it's coming from. So we assume it's something called dark matter. We just got to figure it out. Close to us here in Naperville is this Fermi lab, right? Right, very close. They have a particle accelerator. So I know a couple of theoretical physicists who work with particle accelerators, right? And their time is busy spent trying to have particles bombard each other so that somehow or the other they'll see one particle come out that, hey, we found dark matter. They're struggling very hard. From the Bhagavatam, we see that what's keeping it all together? The universal form. Now they may find some kind of matter that is behind the show, but even behind that is this subtle universal form. And it's there in the Bhagavatam. Very recently, when ultrasonic technology came out, they were able to figure out that at the 7th month, a baby becomes conscious within the womb. Because before that, you couldn't really tell, right? Without ultrasonic technology, how would you know what's going on in the womb? They figured out that at the 7th month is when baby becomes really conscious. The Bhagavatam says it already. The 7th month, the baby becomes conscious. In chapter 31, maybe, of the same canto, canto 3. Technology is already there. The answer is already there. But it's a little complicated to understand, right? So I'll end with this this section in the third paragraph, but second paragraph. Prabhupada explains that the Lord is so difficult to understand with words and minds. He refuses to be intelligible. And therefore, he's also known in the verse, the word adokshaja is used. Adha akshaja. Aksha means I. Ja means to be born from. Akshaja means to be born from the I. Adha means going past that which is born or seen by the eye. Adokshaja literally means someone who's beyond the senses. Now, some of you may know this verse, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, Text 6. Savai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhakti adhokshaje ahaituki apratihata yayatma suprasidati. That the secret to happiness is by and not just the secret to happiness, the paradharma, the very nature of the soul, the very nature of the self is to engage in ahaituki apratihata, unmotivated, uninterrupted devotional service unto that person who you cannot even see. How do you love someone and give your heart to someone that you cannot even perceive? But that is the happiness of the soul, and that is the intricate nature of the soul. It's intrinsic to the soul. Prabhupada writes in that purport, it's the most congenial form of intimacy. We're all looking for intimacy, and we get disappointed with relationships in this material world, isn't it? The most congenial form of intimacy is with Krishna. In that verse is saying. So Adokshaja, he's beyond the senses. That's the struggle. So you got to have a little bit of faith. How do you see? So one cannot, Prabhupada is saying that one cannot see him. So he's known as Avan Manasa Gochara. He's beyond conception of words and mind. You can be a puffed up frog, trying to get puffed up to be as big as the Pacific Ocean and get pop and burst and die, unfortunately. You're not going to be able to get. So the often quoted verse by Rupa Goswami is Ata Shri Krishna Namadi Na Bhaved Grayam Indriye. Ata Shri Krishna Nam Adi. The name of Krishna, the form of Krishna, the pastimes of Krishna, who Krishna is, how Krishna is working even within our own body to help us digest food. we just go along life eating all the things we want and it just digests, and then it goes out the next day and it's like, wow, how did that all happen, right? We don't know how Krishna is working. Ata Shri Krishna Namadi na bhaved grayam indriya. We can't conceive it with our senses. Sevan mukhe hi jivada, but beginning with the tongue and beginning with the service, seva, by beginning with service, the mood of service, starting with the tongue. Swayam eva spurateda. Swayam, by Krishna's own volition, as it is said in this word, Svena, by his own volition, he decided to reciprocate with the prayers of the demigods to show them the gigantic universal form. By Krishna's own volition, in his own time, and in his own way, we can't Hare Krishna, we can only Hare Krishna. Krishna will reveal to us who he is. And that happens, like the gigantic universal form, manifesting, it happens gradually. That there's a gradual revelation of Krishna in our hearts as we engage in loving service, starting with the tongue. That is chanting his holy name, taking Krishna prasadam with some consciousness, not just cobbling it up, but consciously taking Krishna prasadam as a seva, like that. Okay, so I'll pause there. Any questions or thoughts or comments?
I was thinking, two points.
Can you speak a little louder so the devotees on the line can hear you?
So, one thing I was understanding, the subject matters are very technical and very difficult to understand even for a person who has making PhD also, right? So it's not easy to understand what is there in the Srimad Bhagavatam. As you said, there's very subtle things, right? It's not like gross things that one will be able to see everything with our own senses. But then as one gets purified, as you said, the subtler things get more clearer and clearer.
Yeah.
It's not that it's there, but actually I'm not understanding those things.
Yes.
So, the example or analogy you gave, that lady carrying
The basket, yeah.
they are getting purified. Of course, as we understand, you said, and also actually it's not by our own means I'll be able to understand the subject matters, even if I get purity, right? Because the high topics.
It's not our strength, it's Krishna's revelation. Yeah.
So that comes only, by hearing to a few, devotees, right? So otherwise, if somebody has a material strength, material qualities, or material intelligence to understand the subject matters, it's not possible, even if they study day and night.
Yes.
Right? Everything is out there, so it's very secret. That's one thing. And the other thing, I was thinking how great the Supreme Lord is. When we go in front of Him and pray, of course, He's standing there. How tiny are we, right? Because we'll not be able to do small things, but He is creating the way. Big universes are coming out of His force. And also, the examples that you gave about the apple and the fruit. Those are small things compared to what He has done. So, but those itself are amazing us. So, yeah, those things. They generally. Sometimes it comes to me. When I go in front of Him and say, "Oh, boss, how small are we?" So it's very. To that person, I'm able to stand in front of Him and do something. So it really humbles me. So
very humbling. Yeah. No, excellent point. Thank you for sharing that. That's something that's obviously touched you, I can see. Yeah. Any other comment or question or reflection? Anyone online, please feel free to unmute and speak up. Be happy to hear from you. Okay. Thank you all for participating today. And hope you have the rest an enjoyable Krishna conscious rest of your weekend. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Kantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai.